around the time that the Kindle was just becoming a phenomenon, the electronic book.
Okay.
And my younger brother is a computer guy. That's what he does for a living. He's very savvy with this stuff. So I guess he would have been what you would call an early adopter of the Kindle.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool.
Who got it and said, all right, I see how this is an interesting platform. And so he asked me for a copy of Trojan Horse in a .mobi format. And I said, right, what's a .mobi format? I said, I've got it in Word. He said, well, the .mobi format is what you read on a Kindle. And I said, right, what's a Kindle? Because I didn't have any idea what it was at that point. And ironically, so I sent him the thing in Word. He put it in .mobi and put it on his Kindle. My birthday was, I think, a month later, and just coincidentally, my wife bought me a Kindle for my birthday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in the intervening space there, I said to myself, well, what's this all about? So I did some research into what a Kindle was and what ebooks were and all that. So I was beginning to get familiar. My birthday's in early November. So between early November and the middle of January, and this would have been January 2011, I educated myself sufficiently and worked with another friend of mine who was a post-production guy with creating cover, and got my Trojan Horse converted to be read on the Kindle and got it uploaded into Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. So I'm going to bypass the traditional publishing route and just throw it out there and see if I can promote it, see what happens. So that's how I got my first novel up there, and I got really lucky with it. I think I had it priced originally at $9.95 alongside the authors that I admired, and it took me about 2 weeks to realize that I sold maybe a half a dozen books. That was maybe not a great strategy.
Yeah.
So I started dropping the price, and this was the time when a lot of indie authors were pricing their books at 99 cents. So that's what I decided to do ultimately, and I did that around the same time that I had a promotion. You can buy space on these newsletters that are targeted at ebooks, and a lot of them specifically at Kindles. And I had a promotion that worked pretty well for me, and I sold a couple of hundred books in a 2-day promotion, something like that, at 99 cents. And I remember getting up the next Saturday morning, and I looked, because Kindle Direct Publishing, you can check real time, like every hour they update what your sales are. And Saturday morning, between like 9 o'clock and 10 a.m., I had sold another 100 books. And I thought, wow, that's great. And then I checked an hour later, and I'd sold a couple hundred more books, and then a couple hundred more, and a couple hundred more. And finally I started looking around, because I know how Amazon's master software promotes, even though I don't think anybody understands that black box. I think what must have happened is they have all these things like movers and shakers or trending up, and their software picked up my book.
Wow. So you got into the Amazon
trending.
algorithm, huh?
Yeah, the algorithm grabbed me, and my mother-in-law got the email. I didn't get it, but they send out blast emails, and it was 4 new mystery and thrillers, and there was one big one in the center and 3 small ones across the bottom, and Trojan Horse was right there as the prominent one, and that book took off, and the thing hit the top 10 at one point. And I started getting calls from real agents, and it was amazing.
Wow.
And that book stayed there. It was the number one. The category was spy stories and tales of intrigue. It was the number one in that category for like a month, I think.
Wow.
So what I did was,
by the way, but go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What I did was I had another book that I had started a year or two earlier. I released as my second book, called The Gravy Train, which was a variant of the first book I wrote, which was released as the third, which is Bull Street. The Gravy Train and Wall Street and Bull Street are both stories of young Wall Streeters getting embroiled in in various machinations and learning the business, and then they wind up actually having their lives threatened. One's about an insider trading thing, the other's about a bankruptcy case where the Wall Street sharks are trying to take this guy's company over and steal it from him. So at any event, I realized that the successful indie authors at that time were pricing at 99 cents, but they were also getting a lot of books out there just to feed their readership. So that's what I did, is I released in pretty quick succession Gravy Train and then Bull Street within, 3 to 6 months apart, something like that.
So you jumped on the momentum. You seized on the momentum.
Yeah. And at the same time, I got contacted by a publisher called Thomas & Mercer, which is an imprint of Amazon's publishing division. I got contacted by one of their senior editors there saying, we love Trojan Horse and we'd love to take you on as one of our stable of authors. And then he explained to me all the various advantages of being, under their umbrella. And the model is totally different than traditional publishing. I didn't have an agent to go through them. And the deal you get is quite substantially different than the traditional publishing model. And they do a lot of promotion. So I said, what the heck have I got to lose? So I had written was writing my fourth novel, which is called Vaccine Nation, which I edited back with Richard Marrick again, by the way.
Okay.
And I released that in November through Amazon's, through Thomas & Mercer, in November of 2011. And what they also did was they took the first 3 books and re-released them through themselves. So they have the rights to those 3 now as well.
So you are, I don't know if it almost seems like you had a game plan going back years, but I'm sure you didn't. But if you think of the way this came about, you sought out help from people who were already in the industry. You weren't shy about asking for help. You sought help of established professionals. You made sure that you worked with good people. And I think the biggest, most interesting thing is you adapted to changes in technology. Now, so many people out there are having, this is a big problem. Now, our backgrounds, I worked on the trading floor for years, and technology basically shut it down. Now, so many people would sit there and gripe and groan and say, oh, well, what I used to do, they do on a computer now. Or what do? You adapt, you adjust. You did that just, organically, without thinking about it, without... Now, do you think that comes from your background in business, or is that from, just your personality? Because I'm trying to think of, for a listener to think what in their background, what they do can help them make adjustments to this, this changing scene in front of us, Well,
I think one of the reasons I was successful was that I did have a career in business, and I looked at writing as, in part, it's a business, and I really applied myself to learning the ebook business and how just the mechanics of it work, but also how you can promote things yourself. And I did approach it as a business. At the same time, I think there's something in my personality maybe that helped me be successful in business, where I have some degree of adaptability so that I can adjust to things as they're happening.
No, it is very hard. I see people. The technology thing is big, and I think one of the things we want to do with the show is, through your experience or other people's experience, allow listeners to adapt it to their life. Like, you walk into the bank now, and there's a kiosk inside where the teller used to be. And I think of the poor woman who's showing people how to work the kiosk that's replacing her job, So hopefully people can listen to you and our other guests and think for themselves how they can make this, You made so many adjustments along the way without really, without making them noteworthy, but they were pretty noteworthy. Is there something that you think you could tell our listeners that would really, help them make these adjustments, like you did?
Well, one thing that I always like to give that Winston Churchill quote. I'm not sure I've got it exactly right, but it's just very simple. Never, 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 never give up. If you really want to do something, you just have to take the attitude that somehow you're going to make it work. The other thing that maybe an analogy is throwing yourself into the water over your head and then just forcing yourself to swim out of whatever you get yourself into, or put yourself on the black diamond slope of the mountain and figure out how to get down, even though you're not a good enough skier to do it, because the life threat of actually maybe killing yourself is going to pull the best out of you.
The idea of the Vikings burning the bridges behind them, right? Well, or burning their ships, so they couldn't leave. They could only go forward. They couldn't retreat. But also what someone said to me, which I think is very good, and you've certainly fit into this, is step one is what you're doing has to be good. In other words, you have to have a good product. And then after that comes all the rest. And your book's certainly, obviously very good and very interesting, very exciting. But that goes back to, I guess, the beginning, where you spent so many hours and so many years actually working on your craft. And that's really, comes full circle, because you run into resistance and you run into obstacles. But you have to really believe in what you're doing is good. Did you feel that? Like, do you feel what's the word? Like, you must feel pride in your work, and you.
Oh yeah.
Like, I know. Yeah. I think I can't believe people aren't reading this. You know what I mean? I mean, you must feel that way.
Well, there is a craft to writing, and you have to learn it, and that was, I think, the biggest thing I got out of working with Richard Marek was, and because it's like if you play golf or anything, you have to put yourself in the hands of your instructor. And I think in the beginning you can only have one. You can't be reading 5 different books about writing. You can't have 3 different editors. You can't take the advice of multiple people when you're saying, I'm going to put myself totally in your hands. I'm going to let you break me down to the extent I think I'm better than I am, and then build me back up. But also do that with the right person, with someone who has established that they are very knowledgeable about whatever it is you're trying to learn how to do. And so the craft is really important. And look, I can't tell you I'm the greatest writer in the world, but if I could write better than I do, I would probably write literary fiction, in which case I probably wouldn't sell any books, or not many of them.
Yeah, that's true too.
I like to read thrillers, which is why I've read, as an English major, I've read tons and tons and tons of literary fiction, which is basically what you read as an English major. But because I like to read thrillers, I decided, and I knew enough about publishing to know you can't write a nonfiction book and then 3 fiction books that are different genres completely and ever get a reputation, because some people can do that, but basically you got to pick your spot. And so I picked thrillers because that's what I like to read, and so I needed to find a thriller editor who could teach me the mechanics and the structure of writing a thriller.
I like that. So, that's very good. That's very good. A lot of people say, women read a lot. The majority of readers are women. Why don't people have said to me, why don't you write stories focused towards women? And and I'm like, well, it's not what I do. So you have to be true to your art form or your craft in some way, and I think that comes through when people read it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't write about stuff you don't know anything about either. You can't just do research on the internet and say, I'm going to write about this, because you're never going to get it right. So in all of my books, there's some element of my former investment banking career. Even though you might not think that from an